What do we want?
Precapture RAW!
When do we want it?
Now!
All jokes aside, great to see Nikon is updating the firmware on these cameras. I'm going to get into all the great things that firmware version 5 has, but folks, please join me in encouraging and wishing them well, the engineers at Nikon. Godspeed. Get us the Precapture RAW. I'll talk about it later. I really think maybe they're aiming for too high of a bar. We just want to see something, right? Anyway, ta-da! Version 5.0 for the Nikon Z9 was just announced by Nikon. I had no idea it was coming. I got the email from MPS, probably like a lot of you. I've updated this camera, and I've already updated my Nikon Expert Setup Guide, going through the top line enhancements and showing some of it. Jokes aside, I'm genuinely so glad to see Nikon committed to updating the Z8 and Z9 with firmware. Not pointing fingers, but we've seen some camera updates in the past couple of years that almost could have been a firmware update. And the Z9's been on the market for quite a while. From where we started out to even version 2 and version 4, they could have held back so much of that stuff to put in the Z9 Mark II or whatever it's going to be called, and had people happy. By putting it in these, one, I'm super glad because I own a pair of Z9s. But two, I'm also really excited that means that there must be even bigger things coming once we have additional processor headroom for the second generation of Z9. So let's just quickly run through what the update includes. I'll have a link to where you can download it below, and if you're not already on my Nikon Expert Setup Guide, you can check that out below. It takes you through the Z8, the Z9, the ZF, and all of the other cameras in the Z system, how to initially set them up out of the box, what all of the physical controls do, complete menu deep dive, and major firmware updates and that kind of thing are included free of charge. So check it out. Now, in terms of what this guy brings, there's a few top line things, and they're saying it's mainly aimed at sports and portrait photographers. I think it's a little bit broader than that. It's aimed at anyone who uses auto capture and portrait photographers. So auto capture, great feature where you can set up your camera and have it essentially scanning the frame for you set all the parameters. So between 2 meters to 5 meters with this degree of sensitivity, I want you looking for people. And then it will, and all your other variables you've set it up, when it detects that, it will start shooting. So great if you want to leave your camera pointed at a bird feeder. Or now that this update brings airplanes, I guess that probably gets rockets as well. So if you wanted to leave your camera as a rocket is taking off down in Florida or something, then you can have the camera detect it as it goes through the frame. Great. Or of course for plane spotters as well. So that's all great, but just think about if you're shooting a scene where you get access, you can set up a camera, but then you need to leave your camera there, like maybe, I don't know, let's say you're shooting bears and they only come out at nighttime and you can't stay there, but you can set up your camera. Leaving the camera constantly scanning the frame, it's like on hyper alert, 100% of the time scanning with its maximum processor, it burns through the battery. So now it's added the ability for you to set a start time. So you could say, I know that the rocket's going to take off at 9 a.m., so just start scanning at 8:55 a.m. rather than starting when I have to walk away from the camera. So if you're using auto capture, fantastic. They've also added DX capture mode for auto capture, and it now has a charming yellow box around the display so that you know that you're in auto capture mode. Then we're just going to have to get used to this. With the Z8 and Z9 sharing so much hardware, but probably different development teams and different release schedules, the Z8 gets some features and leapfrogs the Z9, and the Z9 comes back and gets those and a few more, and they just keep kind of leapfrogging each other. So the portrait things are new for the Z9, but they're not new to the Nikon range overall. So first of all, we're getting the rich tone portrait as one of the picture controls. It's quite a nice profile. If you're into shooting with profiles, just scan through and it's there now available. We also have the off or 3 modes, 3 different levels of skin softening, as well as portrait impression balance. And you're able to set up 3 different profiles. Depending on the kind of shooting you're doing, you might want quite different looks. Now there's like a dozen other top line features. You can read through all of them over at the link in my description. A couple of ones that jumped out at me, that some of them have just come from the Z8, like the ability to manual focus and hit the shutter button for it to pull you back out from your maximum zoom in. We've got some updates to high-res zoom operability. You can also now, if you have extended menus enabled, you can split out your video and stills modes, which is great. That's actually something I really appreciate with the Sonys. You can choose which settings move across. So you can say, okay, keep my aperture and ISO and this and this and this. But for me, I don't want my shutter to go between the two because I want to choose my shutter based on my video frame rate rather than what it might be to get a sharp still. For example, shooting birds, I might be at 1,000 or a 2,000th of a second for stills, but if I'm doing 100 frame per second video, I want my shutter speed down at 200. So to be able to tell it not to carry those settings across is really nice. We also have added Wi-Fi station mode, which will let you connect SnapBridge to your phone using a Wi-Fi connection without occupying the phone's full Wi-Fi connection. So then you'd be able to still remain connected to the internet whilst accessing your camera via Wi-Fi. Now, back to that pre-capture thing. I wonder if, so we have it in JPEG. It works brilliantly. It's so useful in some shooting situations. I've been shooting a lot. If you didn't see it, I put my review of the Sony A9 III out just yesterday, actually. And it's brilliant, and it does pre-capture RAW at full speed, which in its case is ridiculous speed. So, of course, I would love to see that for the Z9 as well. But I don't want to speak for you without your permission. What do you think? I personally would be happy to see pre-capture RAW at 8 or 10 frames a second to begin with, as opposed to only having the JPEG option. So I don't know if this is more engineering headaches, but I'm guessing it's not only to do with the amount of data that needs to be transferred, but also the processing. So like sometimes shooting compressed RAW is harder on your processor than uncompressed RAW, even though uncompressed RAW is more bandwidth that it has to write to the cards. So I'm guessing it's to do with the processing and the bandwidth. So if it was limited to being a particular RAW mode at a lower frames per second for pre-capture, and then say we could be set up and I'm ready, I'm good to go, I'm half pressed down on my focus, it's pre-capturing, I hit the shutter when the action begins, the bird dives off its perch or whatever, then the previous 8 or 10 frames are saved, and then the pre-capture has kind of at that point ended and we go into normal shooting, then it could revert to the 20 or 30 frames a second that I had the camera set to. That for me would be already amazing. Or even if we had to stay at the 8 or 10 frames a second. I just think the people who are benefiting from pre-capture, and it's a great feature, and I hope every manufacturer will bring it out, but there are a lot of us who really love it, but if it's only available in JPEG, it kind of negates the whole point altogether. So we captured the moment, but in a shitty file format. Well, would it have been better to be shooting RAW and just rely on our instincts? Give us something in RAW, please, Nikon. I really, really hope that that isn't what you're holding back for the next generation of Z9. If you guys are Nikon shooters, check out that setup guide. I also have one for Sony Alpha system as well as Hasselblad and Fuji GFX. Full details on all of those are below. Let me know what's your wish list for future updates for the Z9, Z8. And I know so many of you are going to be commenting, where's my update for my Z6, Z7 or Mark II of each of those? I replied to the comments in the past. I'm sorry, but I really think that the major updates for those cameras are done. They don't have the same kind of processors, and I don't think we're going to get major autofocus updates to those cameras. Don't shoot me, I'm not Nikon, but that's my 2 cents. I don't think we're gonna see it. Let me know what you'd like to see. This is getting rambly. I'll see you later. What do we want? Pre-capture in RAW. Can you say it with me? I'm gonna say it. You can be off camera, but just yell it. What? It's gonna be, what do we want? RAW pre-capture. When do we want it now? We'll do it twice. Okay. What do we want? No, you just do the... No, so, you've never been to a union like rally, right? So it's like, I'm saying, what do we want? And then the audience says, Precapture raw.
Okay, so I'll say Precapture raw.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I say, when do we want it?
Now?
Now, excellent. You got it. So we'll do that whole thing twice.
Precapture raw.
Yeah. I'm going to like make a funny voice, Precapture raw, at the same time so it sounds like we have a group. Okay. What do we want? Precapture raw. Where are you? Fuck, man. One job.
Okay.
Okay. Forget the camera. We'll just do a rehearsal together. What do we want?
Precapture raw.
When do we want it?
Now.